Today I'm going to teach you who pays closing costs in real estate transactions, and it honestly does depend on the situation, but by the end of this you'll kind of understand the different situations. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Justin Yearong, and I've coached hundreds of students to make money in real estate. So the first thing about paying closing cost, it's completely negotiable, completely. Even though your market might have industry standards where the buyer and seller pays half and half, or the seller pays all, or the buyer pays all. I don't know the standards for all the markets, but even if there's a standard, everything is negotiable. Just remember that. Now, as the buyer, the obvious reason why you'd want to pay closing costs is it makes your offer more attractive to the seller, which means that the seller is going to be more likely to accept your offer. So that's the obvious benefit. It really depends on the situation. For example, let's say you're in a competitive environment. Let's say the seller has her market listed on the MLS, on the market, and there are a lot of other buyers out there competing for that same property. Like, they're getting a lot of other offers. In that case, it might be advantageous for you as the buyer to say, look, I'm gonna pay all your closing costs, just to try to make your offer more attractive, because that's the position you're in. You don't have a lot of leverage as the buyer. But if you're in a position where maybe you talk to the homeowner directly and there's not a lot of competition, like let's just say you cold call this homeowner because you're cold calling your list like you're supposed to. You cold call them, you find this homeowner, you realize that you're probably like the only, or maybe there's one other buyer talking to the seller, and they're in a position of like maybe some desperation where they need to get it sold, which that's the person you're trying to help. But if they're in that situation and you offer to pay all their closing costs up front, well, it's good because you make your offer more attractive to them. They're probably going to accept it or be more likely to accept it. However, you might not have had to do that. You probably could have started saying whatever your industry standard is, but you probably could have said, look, here's the offer. We're going to do half and half closing costs. That's just typical in our market, and just moved on. And they probably could have said, yeah, that's fine. That's typical. And then you would have been able to save a lot of money on closing costs, because it depends on your area, but closing costs, a couple grand, whatever it is, you could have saved money. But it just, like I said, it just depends on the situation that you're in and kind of what kind of leverage that you have, whether it's competitive or not. So those are the obvious reasons of who will pay closing costs, when's a good time, when's a bad. I just know I've had experience where I offer to pay all the closing cost and they accept it right away. And then later on, I realized I was the only person they were actually talking to, because when I was talking to these homeowners, during the conversation, it popped up where they had declined a lot of other buyers, or a handful of other buyers that came to their door, but they just didn't like them at all. They refused to do business with them because they felt like sharks to them. And when they took my offer and I offered to pay all the closing costs, just kind of in the back of my mind, I was like, I probably could have started with half and half, where the seller pays half the closing costs and then I pay the other half, just because they're in an okay position where they would have just gotten a little bit less at the very end for their funds, but I would have been in a much better position. And if they said no, then I would have been ready to drop down, or been ready to negotiate something else in exchange for me dropping down. Like, that's how negotiation works. Sometimes it's helpful or beneficial to keep something in your back pocket if you want to use it, or just to be ready to use it. So that's just a really quick video of who pays closing costs in transactions and when it's usable, or when it's a good idea to, when it's a good idea not to. And if you enjoyed this video, I also make a lot of other real estate content, so be sure to follow me on social media everywhere. And click on the link in the description below if you do want a free strategy session.